Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Burns.
Yeah, Nancy Burns here.
And we're from Future Theater. And you know what we like to listen to?
Bang.
Radio on Sunday nights at 9 p.m.
At 9 p.m.?
What
Eastern.
network?
Oh, the best network on the whole entire internet. Inception Radio Network.
Radio host for Pang Radio, Mike Lucas.
We are live from IRN Studios North in northern Wisconsin with a 106-degree heat index. Welcome to Pang Radio. Tonight we have a good show for you. It is July 26, 2015, Sunday night for our special spectacular show. I have my co-host Ken Storch, who beat me by 4 degrees. Hey, Ken.
Yeah, it's 110 here in northeast Oklahoma in the Ozark Mountains, and it's cooking.
Oh, boy, that's cooking. You want to talk a little bit over our guest tonight, too, Ken?
Yeah, we're really fortunate. We have David Marler. Am I pronouncing that right? Marler?
Yep.
Marlor, yes.
On tonight, he has written a book, and we're going to discuss that tonight, folks. I think you're going to find this extremely interesting. I have read the book twice. It's fascinating. It's a good read, and I would highly recommend if you're into flying saucers and E.T., I suggest that you read this book because it's well-researched, well-written.
Very cool. Ken, you have any shout-outs for...
I do. The usual suspects, George and Patty in Missouri and Doug. Lynn and Bob in Albuquerque, New Mexico, in your neck of the woods, David. And one other one is Marilyn and Dick Carlson down in Oklahoma City.
There you go, and you stole one from me because Marilyn just did a shout-out on our Facebook page. And another shout-out to my buddy Joshua Grams. He's in Rochester, Minnesota. Rochester is not his normal home. He's local up here to Superior, Wisconsin, but he's... going through a battle, and we're sending out our prayers to him. His young daughter, needs a heart transplant, so we're hoping that a donor comes very soon. And prayers going out to you, Josh, and thanks for supporting and listening to Pang Radio. So, yeah, it's a tough situation there for Josh. Well, what do you think of them pictures of Pluto there, Ken?
Pretty fascinating. I'm confused now. Is Pluto a planet, or is it not? Have they decided? I mean, I know it was, and then it wasn't.
I think they're still calling it a dwarf planet.
A dwarf planet.
Yeah.
But it was some fascinating pictures. I mean, it's out there in the solar system, and supposedly there's one other one beyond that. Planet X or Nibiru or whatever they call it.
Yeah, that one that's supposed to come around every 10,000 years or 14,000 years.
Something like that.
Very cool. Well, you know what? Let's get into the show tonight. Well, actually, I got a few more announcements. You can listen to IRN on YouTube. We just hit 800 subscribers today. Thank you for all the support. If you want to listen to all our shows on the network, subscribe to YouTube. You can listen to the podcast anywhere, anytime. You can listen to us on our apps on Apple and Android store. Also, we're in the Amazon store for a few of you users using that Amazon Fire phone. Also, you can listen to us via our IRN app and various other things. So it's going to be many different ways to listen. But tonight, let me get to David Marler's bio here. David Marler has had a lifelong interest in subject to UFOs. He joined the Mutual UFO Network in 1990 as a Field Investigator Trainee. Since then, he has served as a Field Investigator, State Section Director, and as well as Illinois State Director. David is currently an independent UFO researcher. David has an exclusive personal library of UFO books, journals, magazines, newspapers, and case files from around the world that covers the last 65 years. Very extensive, very cool. With this, he has been examining the details and history of UFO sighting reports related to patterns. recent evidence of his historical research in his newly published book, Triangular UFOs, An Estimate of the Situation. Here he has provided a comprehensive analysis of triangular UFOs. So, David, we'd like to welcome you to the show tonight. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
I always like to start out with a question on our show, and I'll let Ken. We kind of go back and forth, and we'll get some listener questions too from chat. But David, what got you interested in the UFO phenomena?
Well, it actually goes way back to 1973, and I was 5 years old at the time, and that was my first recollection of being exposed to the UFO phenomenon, or even hearing the term UFO. My father grew up in a small town called Mill Spring, Missouri, which is just outside other small town in southeast Missouri called Piedmont. And there was a famous wave of UFO sightings that occurred there starting in the spring of 1973 that continued for quite a few years. And I remember my father and my sister and my older brothers piling in the car heading down from St. Louis, which is the area I lived in at the time. And remember the excitement, the anticipation, the thermoses of coffee being loaded up in the car, the binoculars. And they never observed anything themselves, but they came back with these stories of people that they had spoken to who had seen unusual lights and things in the sky. And in subsequent years, it was investigated by Dr. Harley Rutledge, who was the physics professor at Southeast Missouri State University. And he ultimately wrote a book, which is now a collector's item, called Project Identification. And he went in as a skeptic, but came away as I hate to use the term, but for the sake of argument, quote-unquote, UFO believer after his investigations. And in fact, Ken and I, we attended an anniversary that they held in Piedmont, Missouri back in 2011.
Cool. There you go.
Yeah, we sure did. In fact, I'm looking at the book, Project Identification, and it is it's a phenomenal book, and the data that Professor Harley Rutledge and his group collected, David, is pretty astounding when you look at it, and it cracks me up when skeptics say, well, there isn't any scientific proof that UFO exists, and yet here you have he was the head of the physics department at Southeast Missouri State, and he collected quite a bit of scientific data.
Absolutely. In numerous newspaper articles that I have from the time, I have an extensive file on that case. In numerous St. Louis area newspapers and southern Missouri newspapers, as well as in some St. Louis radio interviews, which I have converted from old reel-to-reels and cassettes to MP3s, Dr. Harley Rutledge repeatedly made the statement that when all this was going on, it was in the newspapers, and my colleagues in the physics department at the university were telling me, well, you're a physics professor, go down there and investigate it. And he would continually tell people at the time, I told my colleagues I wouldn't touch that subject with a 10-foot pole. But over time, the sightings continued, and he decided, to Ken's point, I'm a scientist. I should be investigating this. And in addition to myself, the rest of the scientific community should be investigating this. So, I really give him credit for his objective analysis, for sticking his neck out, his career on the line, especially in 1973. Now we see more scientists coming on board looking at this subject, but in 1973, we still had that invisible college, as it was often referred to, all these PhD college professors that were researching the subject, but were, for the most part, in the closet.
David, is there a specific reason why you chose to research triangular UFOs?
Well, like everyone else that's interested in the subject, around 1989, 1990, that was prevalent in the newspapers. It was prevalent in the UFO periodicals and journals, specifically the Belgian wave of triangular UFO sightings, starting in November 29th, 1989, all the way into spring of 1991. And I was captivated by that. It's one thing to describe seeing a 30-foot silver disc that shoots across the sky, but these sightings were a complete departure from that traditional mindset, that classic stereotypical flying saucer imagery.
Right.
We had large objects estimated to be 200 to 300 feet in length, and by no means were they just fleeting sightings. These objects were hovering stationary for long periods of time. And it wasn't just one witness or two witnesses. We had hundreds of witnesses throughout Belgium that were observing these objects. And subsequent to that wave, we had a series of other incidents across the world, and I started gathering my UFO data in 1990 when I became involved with MUFON. And Ken was over recently in March when he spoke to the New Mexico MUFON group, and he had the fortune to come over afterwards, and he had a chance to kind of see the library that I have here. I'll let him speak to that later if he likes. But
very cool.
I started collecting all this data, and what was amazing to me was the fact that statements were being made not by UFO researchers alone, but skeptics and UFO researchers saying, well, these triangles are something new, therefore they must be military. I'm sitting on hundreds of newspaper clippings, if not thousands, and I'm finding reports going back to the 1950s, the 1960s, 1940s, and really wanted to set the record straight, really paint a historical overview of these reports, the fact that they're not just distributed over time, but geographically. There are similarities, common characteristics, which I outline in the book, and really decided that despite the prevalence of stories and articles, no one had written a comprehensive book on this subset of UFO reports, which, when you look at the National UFO Reporting Center, it's the largest geometric-shaped object being reported. The only other category, if you look at the National UFO Reporting Center statistics, the only one that rates higher is the amorphous category of light, which I think we can all agree that could be a satellite, a star,
Right.
a planet.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as geometric shapes, the triangle is the number one reported object based on the National UFO Reporting Center statistics.
Thank you.
Hey, David. In your book, and this is I found really quite fascinating, is that the first reported, and there may have been other sightings, but the one that was documented goes back to the 1800s. Isn't that correct?
It does. In fact, I'll clarify this for the first time on any show. I recently did a Smithsonian Channel documentary, and they did a very good job, I might add. It's UFOs Declassified. The episode is Black Triangles. It's still scheduled to air here in the States. It's aired in Canada and the UK. But they did a fascinating job of covering not only the modern-day accounts, such as the Southern Illinois case I investigated, which we might be able to talk about later, as well as the Belgian wave, but they actually went back and looked at some of the historical cases that I covered. And, to Ken's point, the earliest account I had, which I've lectured on, was 1882. But in point of fact, I recently acquired the original Scientific American, which I had stumbled across in my research through the works of Charles Fort, where he quotes Scientific American and states that the case, and this particular case, occurred in 1882. However, once I obtained an original 1882 copy of Scientific American with this article, because the one thing I like to do is go back to the source. I don't like to take people's word for it. I like to go back to the original source material if at all possible. The Scientific American was actually published in January of 1882, and it references a case in April. So in actuality, at the risk of embarrassing myself, the account that I have listed as 1882 was actually April of 1881.
Ooh.
So that even one year earlier than what I had originally thought.
That's even before the airships of the 1890s. Wow.
Absolutely, yeah, 1896, 1897
Yeah.
airship sightings, which I think when Ken was here, he saw some of my original newspapers that document some of the airship sightings from those years.
Yeah, and by the way, I just want to tell our listeners I did have an opportunity to visit David at his house and his library, and folks, it's outstanding. It's very, very extensive, very well organized, and David, you're one hell of a researcher, man. I'm impressed.
Well, I appreciate that, and praise from the praiseworthy is always the best. Something recently that I think I can go ahead and just mention here briefly, and this is something I haven't publicly discussed. We're in the final stages of negotiation, but in reference to the library that I've gathered here, as far as the material. One of the things that I haven't mentioned, Ken, to you yet is the fact that the last few weeks I've been in negotiation with the Zimmerman Library at UNM, University of New Mexico, here in Albuquerque, and I have the paperwork sitting right here in front of me on my desk. We're in final negotiations, so I'm going to be putting a will together, and whenever I shuffle off this mortal coil, hopefully not too soon.
Yeah, don't leave us anytime soon, okay?
Yeah, I'd like to be here for at least another few decades, if at all possible. But UNM has graciously come over, spent time, reviewed my library, and they are in agreement that when something happens to me, and I will state this in my will and we'll have signed contracts, they want to incorporate my entire UFO research library into the Zimmerman UNM library here at UNM in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So
outstanding.
Very cool.
First time I publicly acknowledge that. We'll be signing the final papers here very soon, but all of this historical material will be maintained for perpetuity at UNM library. So future generations will be able to benefit from this after we're all gone.
Very cool. Very cool. Now, David, do you think there's any correlation with the advancement in aviation technology and the sightings of these triangular UFOs? Is that kind of what your research is about?
I do. Actually, when I give my presentations across the country, the question always comes up. Well, okay, let's assume for the sake of argument, Dave, that these triangles are real. Do you believe it's something that we manufactured, or do you think this is someone else's technology? Right. And my answer to that is yes. I think that we're dealing with probably a combination of people seeing advanced aircraft far beyond anything that is reminiscent of the B-2 stealth bomber or F-1 17A stealth fighter. I think that some people are observing these craft, and they are military in origin, partly due to the prevalence. There's so many of these reports now. But when you look back at the history, the performance of some of these modern-day triangular UFOs are extremely reminiscent of cases that I've documented from the 1950s and 60s and going back even further. And if you're willing to accept the fact that the modern-day accounts are legitimate, I don't think you can summarily discount these cases from decades before. And especially when you start to see commonalities that go beyond the simple triangular shape. We have lighting characteristics that are eerily similar. We have flight dynamics, the way that these objects maneuver, that are eerily similar. So as as what I'd like to consider myself a semi-educated, semi-rational individual, I'm forced to conclude that these people are describing essentially the same thing.
Right.
But to your question, mixed in with that, I think we are seeing advanced military aircraft at the same time. So, trying to tease those two groups of objects out of the noise of the reports that we're receiving.
Right.
That's where the hard part comes into play.
Hey, David, and I tend to agree with your analysis that in the modern day world that some of what people are seeing are military or examples of our technology. And my question to you is, why the triangle? If the military is duplicating or reverse engineering, but what is it about the triangle, do you think, that would, as an airfoil or a craft, would be more advantageous than the classic saucer shape?
I've talked to some aviation experts in that regard, those that worked at Boeing, McDonnell Douglas, Professor John Allen from British Aerospace, who I interviewed in the book. I talked to a number of these individuals, and the triangular shape does lend to, as you mentioned, a very sleek airfoil or planform design. What's interesting, though, is the fact that you look at some of the flight dynamics. In a number of these cases, and Ken, you recently reviewed the book again, a number of these cases, especially one from 1960, I remember from Project Blue Book that comes to mind, they described and sketched this equilateral triangle with a bright light at each point, moving with the flat side as the leading edge. Now, that defies conventional aerodynamic principles as we know it. Any type of aircraft that even has any slight delta wing shape or configuration, you assume that the point is the leading edge. And unfortunately, or fortunately, in some of these cases, that's not what we see. The flat side is the leading edge, and the apex of the triangle is trailing behind. So with some of these reports, again, I keep qualifying that, with some of these reports, we're dealing with something beyond conventional combustion jet engines. We must be. If these reports are valid, if what people are describing is accurate, we're dealing with some radical new type of propulsion technology. Yeah,
I read an article, and it's probably been 20 years and it had reference that the United States Navy was working on a super blimp, if you will, and its its configuration was in the form of a triangle. Are you familiar with that?
Absolutely. There was that one, and then there was another one, and the name escapes me right now, over in the UK that was being developed, and it absolutely takes on. It looks like a very large triangular shape, and in fact, even some of the earlier cases, not to that degree. There were some reports in Project Blue Book files. There was one from the Russian military files of triangular UFOs that I did not include in the book, and I even made a special point to state I did not include these reports, and this is why. Back in the 50s and the 60s, there were high-altitude research balloons, which once they were at a high altitude, observed from the ground, if you observed it as you were directly below it, it looked like a delta or triangular-shaped object. But they're extremely light reflective. Sometimes they were described as semi-transparent. And there was a famous case from Madrid, Spain, where hundreds of people observed this triangular object. There were photographs. I have numerous newspapers from all across the country and the world that documented this sighting. But when you look at it, it looks eerily similar to the high-altitude research balloons that were being launched at that time. And Ken, most recently, these larger blimp or dirigibles are, in fact, taking on that triangular appearance and have actually for some time. And that's why, as you can appreciate, going through the thousands of triangular UFO reports, I tried to, properly vet these cases and tried to eliminate reports where people just saw a large triangular object stationary or moving slowly. The ones that really impressed me were the ones where witnesses would describe a large triangular object with lighting configurations hovering, and then in the blink of an eye, rapidly accelerating, and in some cases with the complete absence of a sonic boom. So these are the ones that definitely get into that category of more high strangeness, whereas just observing a triangular object in the sky, it could possibly be a dirigible or something of this nature. And the January 5th, 2000 case I investigated in southern Illinois, where all these Illinois police officers and a couple of civilians had observed this triangular-shaped object. It couldn't be explained away as a balloon simply because it would be hovering stationary and then rapidly accelerate, in some cases hundreds of miles an hour. And any type of lighter-than-air framed blimp or dirigible simply couldn't withstand the amount of G's. And that's not me saying this. This is the aviation experts that I consulted and asked them, with regard to, their knowledge, could this be a blimp? And it was in their opinion that no, it couldn't have been. It had the capability to make those rapid accelerations.
Interesting. Now, David, you kind of explained it a little bit about what size have these, what size variation have these triangles came in as reports? I mean, from real mini.
Well,
go ahead.
Yeah, they do vary. I mean, most often we hear about the larger ones. And again, and I know Ken will back me up on this, one of the hardest things for UFO eyewitnesses to accurately document are sizes of these objects, because by definition they are unidentified flying objects. We don't really know how large they are. We can only describe the appearance, and hopefully we have some objects in the foreground or background to help gauge that. But, if you don't know how big a 747 is standing next to it and you see it a mile away, you really have a hard time gauging what the true size of something like that is. And so, too, we find that with these UFO eyewitnesses, that they're trying to give us the best guesstimate. However, I will say this, even though even skeptics will argue that, well, people are describing size, they really don't have any idea. Let me just add this. One of the best descriptives I've ever heard with regard to one of these triangular UFOs was by a 30-year retired law enforcement officer who I've come to know over the last 10, 15 years quite well. He personally relayed to me the sighting of a large triangular object north of St. Louis in, ironically enough, November of 2000, several months after the January 5th, 2000 incident in southern Illinois across the Mississippi. And he and several friends, some of whom were law enforcement, one actually worked at Boeing in St. Louis, they were sitting there, and they had done this many times. It was one of their many outings out into the woods, where they would basically spend, the day and into the evening hunting, and then barbecuing out on an open fire. The area in question was a wooded area, but there was a large open field, roughly, I believe, 200 to 300 yards, if memory serves, the size of this field that they were next to. And one of the gentlemen walked out and was just looking up at the sky and suddenly yelled, "Hey guys, what is this? What is this? What is this?" And so they all run out to the clearing and look up, and they saw this large triangular or wedge-shaped object, craft, if you will. And the description that this gentleman, John, laid to me was one of the best descriptives, because I think even though there is that ambiguity when we're trying to determine size on these UFOs, he told me, he goes, "Dave, you couldn't look at it. You had to pan your head from left to right to see the entire thing."
Wow.
Regardless of altitude, I think we'll agree that's a large object.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I would say that would definitely get your attention, that's for sure.
But I think that's one of the best descriptives I've heard that really lends some credence to how large, or an appreciation of how large these objects are.
Well, and just to dovetail what you were speaking on, the Phoenix lights, there were several excellent witnesses that saw this craft, and they described it as a chevron.
Absolutely.
Shaped, and it was huge. I mean, there was a United Airlines pilot that was on the ground and I guess it went literally over the top of his house with him and his wife standing there, and he was able to describe this chevron, and he said it was several hundred yards across.
And we talk. You're absolutely right, and we talk about the Phoenix Lights case. But the one thing I also try to instill in the audiences that I lecture to, and in the book as well, is the Phoenix Lights is the most dramatic, well-documented case. But there are so many others. We of course have the famous Hudson Valley wave that described a very similar object, a chevron or V or wing shape. In some cases, they describe triangular-shaped objects. We have that. We also have an incident that occurred over the state of Missouri in November of 1980. And even though it was over the course of just one night, there were hundreds of witnesses. And this was thoroughly written up and investigated by veteran UFO researcher and journalist Bob Kraft. And I included that in the book as well. And then, of course, the Belgian wave. We can't forget that one as well. So there have been these incidents, and then there was also a case involving multiple law enforcement officers over Memphis, Tennessee in 1977. So that was the one thing I really tried to do with the book. One of the reasons I wanted to write the book is I had all these disparate cases, but when you put it all together, I think it makes a very strong argument that you have to be the ultimate cynic to read my book and read these cases from credible news sources and declassified government documents. You have to be the ultimate cynic to sit there and say, all of these people are hallucinating and or lying and or, simply misconstruing things. It's just, you have to be the ultimate cynic to just summarily discount all this. And the other thing, in addition to the eyewitness testimony, is we do have radar confirmation in a number of these cases.
Very cool. Now, David, let's take our first break. That's a good stopping point. We'll talk about some radar cases and other triangle UFOs. We'll be right back on Paying Radio with David Marler. Hang in there. Welcome back to Paying Radio. Tonight we're talking with David Marler, and triangular UFO is a great subject. It's been an awesome show so far. Now, David, have you had any good radar evidence in your research?
Well, relative to the number of actual sightings, it's few, but we do have some very well-documented cases. Some of these are from the military files, the declassified military files. There was one that was featured recently on the Smithsonian Channel documentary I mentioned that they recreated actually quite well. And this involved an F-86 Saberjet pilot that was flying over Albany, Georgia on January 28, 1953. So again, we're going back. We're not talking 1980s, 1990s. We're talking 1953.
Wow.
And this pilot was flying a solo mission at night, and he observed this bright star or light in the sky. He thought it was a star, but he was impressed by the fact that it had this extremely sharp circular outline. It didn't have that fuzzy or twinkling or scintillating look that many stars and planets have when you look up in the night sky. So he thought it was very strange and decided, well, I'll increase my altitude. If the object gets larger in my windscreen, then obviously it's something in the atmosphere. If it doesn't change perspective, then obviously it's something astronomical, a star or a planet. He increases altitude, and very quickly, and this is all documented in the Project Blue Book report, so this is coming from a credible source. This isn't, tabloid material we're talking about. As he increased altitude, he very quickly noticed that the light that was above his jet aircraft was now below him. So he immediately realized that this was not a star or planet.
Yeah, there's a clue.
He decided at this point to try to close in to get better visual of whatever this aircraft was, for lack of a better term. And as he closed in towards the light, which was alternating now at this point, white, orange, it did that several times in rapid succession. And then in the Project Blue Book report, he states, the light then turned into a perfect equilateral triangle. Now, mind you, this is an F-86 Saberjet pilot closing in on this object, or this light, and now it suddenly transforms into a solid triangular object that he's observing. Within seconds, as if that's not enough to wrap your mind around in 1953, observing something like this in the skies over Georgia, he then relays in the Project Blue Book report file, the triangle then divided into two equilateral triangles, which quickly moved off and disappeared. Now, long answer to your question, the Blue Book investigators talked to him, and the final conclusion, the Blue Book report, was that this was a visual sighting of the planet Venus.
Oh, my God.
That really stretches the imagination.
It sure does.
It's always Venus.
It's always Venus or weather balloons, yeah.
Yeah.
Venus or weather balloon, right, guys?
Yeah.
But this is the most important thing. If you can't believe his testimony, if you think he was just hallucinating or his mind went wild, the Albany, Georgia airport was tracking a primary unknown target at the same location at the same time of the pilot sighting.
Oh, there you go right there, yeah.
So there's one radar case that we have through very official sources. I mentioned the sighting that occurred in November of 1980 during that one night over the state of Missouri. It was that object had been tracked on radar, and I actually spoke to a witness who contacted me who read my book and stated that they observed the triangle on that particular night, and it was in Kirksville, Missouri. The Kirksville, Missouri airport had tracked a primary target where the UFO was being sighted at the time. So that was another one in 1980. And then, of course, I think the most popular case involving triangular UFOs being tracked was, of course, the Belgian wave, where they had 4 separate ground-based radar tracking stations tracking this unknown triangular UFO while we had multiple ground observers observing it. And then, of course, we had the 2 F-16s dispatched to try to identify what this object was. One of the F-16s was able to lock on repeatedly with the triangular UFO. But every time they achieved lock-on, the object would pull away at tremendous speeds and make these acute turns that the F-16s could not keep up with. And before I forget, I'm very happy and proud to say that about a month ago, I had the honor of having Mr. Patrick Ferrin, the head of SOBEPS, the head of the Belgian UFO organization, here at my library. And he was making a tour of the United States, and we've been Skyping since my book's been published and exchanging triangular UFO case material. I'm very happy to say I finally had the opportunity to spend time and discuss some of these cases from Belgium as well as other locales with the expert over from Belgium.
That's awesome. That is very cool.
Hey, Dave. I know we talked about this during the break, and just for our listeners, one of the questions that I asked Dave is that had he had any reports where there were landings by any of the triangular craft? And as far as you know, there has not been any. That doesn't mean it hasn't happened. You just don't have any reports of that. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yeah. I have to qualify the statement by saying, I can only speak to what I've found or what I've uncovered as far as, in the newspaper archives and military archives. And that's, as we were discussing, Ken, it's always interesting to look for patterns to see what is there in these reports, not just triangular, but all UFO reports. But it's also interesting to take a step back and say, well, what don't we see? And when you compare the triangular case files to the saucer or flying disc or flying saucer reports over the last several decades, where we have had landings, we have had saucer nests, we have had compressed, irradiated soil, I have yet to find one account of any sighting or report involving a triangular UFO touching ground, actually landing or touching ground or affecting vegetation or soil on the ground. And it's interesting. Again, it's one of those things that raises more questions than it answers.
Oh, right. Hey, and just so that for my own edification, in fact, the ones that I've read, and including in your book, these craft have been relatively big, huge. Do you know of any where there's small? I like the classic saucer shape. You hear it referred to as the sports model. Okay. But in the triangular category, have you heard of the smaller version of the large triangle?
Yes, and that's a good question, because we always focus so much on the larger reports, and quite often those get more notoriety just because of the dramatic nature. But they do vary in size. A number of cases from Project Blue Book, as well as some of the Ministry of Defense files from the UK, which I reviewed all of their declassified files, which was no small task, let me tell you. They involved, in some cases, smaller triangular objects, some that were described as the size of a car or the size of a van. So there are some smaller triangular craft or objects that have been reported. And one that quite often is brought up in my lectures by audience members is, of course, Rendlesham, the Bentwaters incident from December 1980, where Sergeant Jim Peniston described seeing a roughly triangular-shaped object, although it was somewhat faceted and almost pyramidal in shape. It had height as well as length and width. Some people have said, well, don't you think that's a triangular UFO? Well, from a strictly geometric standpoint, yes, it's certainly not circular. So some people are inclined to maybe even include that in the mix. And I'm willing to do that. In fact, I mentioned it briefly in my book, just so I don't completely omit that. So there are these variations. Now, this is where it gets really hairy. We're talking about triangular objects. We're talking about different sizes, and we're comparing it to some of the flying saucer or flying disc reports. This is where things get really bizarre. Quite often, these triangular UFOs, and Ken, you may recall some of these cases that I had in my book, are seen with other UFOs, non-triangular UFOs.
Yeah, I was going to go there, but go ahead.
Well, again, we get into this area of very high strangeness where we have accounts. In fact, one of the most dramatic cases that I uncovered that I had never heard really discussed or lectured about with regard to these triangular UFOs was not just one sighting, not just several, but an entire wave of sightings that swept the country of Denmark from the fall of 1957 into 1958. And they described in detail that all over Denmark, people were reporting these large triangular, and I always qualify this when I do my lectures, triangular spaceships. That's the words that they used in the newspapers of the time. That's not me trying to read things into the story. They described triangular spaceships, and it actually states in one of the newspapers, this was from the Danish newspaper BT, their April 16th, 1958 edition. It stated, triangular spaceships have also now appeared in the southern part of Jutland. From every port come reports of mysterious phenomenon in the sky towards late evening. All witnesses state with certainty that conventional aircraft are not involved. Now, it goes on describing further detail about these large black triangles, but I also came across a Reuters news service article that basically backed up this news account, and this was dated April 19, and the title of the Reuters news service article was Spaceship Over Denmark. It doesn't get better than that. And it describes a woman that on April 15th in the town of Brohyr in Denmark described a low-flying triangular object as big and black. And she further noted as it hovered over the village, again, this idea of it hovering stationary, she described a number of horses. Got a lot of thunder here. I apologize. It describes a number of horseshoe-shaped objects, each emitting a strong light that emerged from the large triangular craft. Now, it's interesting, at the very end of the news service article, Reuters states that they were able to track down approximately 20 other witnesses in the village that testified to the same thing and corroborated the woman's testimony.
Oh, wow.
Very interesting.
Yes.
That's an account of objects coming out. We also have accounts of UFOs entering into the triangular objects. We had disc-shaped objects that were reportedly seen entering into a large triangular object after they had been seen flying alongside a large triangular UFO. This was cited by a BOAC Stratocruiser by the pilot, Captain Howard, and his chief officer, Lee Boyd. And they observed this for 15 minutes flying alongside their commercial airliner over Labrador in 1954.
Wow.
And at one point, Captain Howard, his attention got distracted, and he turned back to look at the UFO, the large UFO that was being flanked by these smaller circular or disc-shaped objects. And he asked the question quizzically. He said, "Where did the smaller objects go?" And Lee Boyd responded by saying, "It looked like they went into the larger one." And so we have accounts of that. Then we have at least 2 to 3 accounts of these triangular objects being seen with large rectangular UFOs. And I know this just when you think it's crazy, we'll raise it a bar. We'll go a little crazier here.
Yeah.
Belgian wave on the first night that really started the Belgian wave, November 29th, 1989. The 2 police officers or gendarmes that were reporting this were Heinrich Nico, and the other officer's name was von Montague. They were reporting back to Albert Kreutz, who was in the Upon Village police station, and they were describing what they were seeing, and Albert Kreutz was kind of laughing it off, and he stepped out on the balcony off of the dispatcher's office there, and he looked out, and not far away from where they were having their sighting of these 2 triangular UFOs, he observed this rectangular object. And he sketched it. I have the sketch in the book. And he has a large light at each corner of the rectangle. And side by side with that, I compared that to a sighting in the 1980s that was investigated by APRO, the Aerial Phenomenon Research Organization, in upstate New York, where a woman and daughter were returning home, saw a large triangular object that disappeared behind the tree line, and shortly thereafter, just a matter of seconds or minutes later, they then saw a large rectangular UFO, dark with a large bright light at each corner of the rectangle. And as I did in the book, if you look at these sketches side by side, you would swear they saw the same thing.
Right.
And added to that, the January 5th, 2000 case in Southern Illinois with these police officers, we had witnesses come forward stating they saw a rectangular UFO seen at the same time as the triangular UFO was being reported.
Crazy. I'm going to get a little more crazier, David. Have you had any reports of entities in the craft being viewed?
There have been some reports in the historical accounts where people observed, a humanoid shape. I really don't have any detail. They just described a humanoid shape that they thought they saw in a window of one of these triangular objects. Now, subsequent to the book being published, I'll be honest with you, I was rather naive when I published this book. My attitude was set the record straight, get the information out there so people can see there's a rich history of these accounts, and let people make up their own minds as to what they think the origin of them are. Although I think the historical argument really begs the question, it might be somebody else's. But I had a number of people contact me. One was a 30-year retired law enforcement officer from the UK who contacted me and stated, I've never reported this publicly to anyone, but for approximately 3 hours I interviewed him by phone, and he described seeing this large triangular UFO with a very detailed sketch, I might add. Quite often we get very crude sketches. He was very, very talented in the sketch that he provided to me. And he stated in the narrative of his report, and it was documented in the sketch, he could see humanoid figures in the window. And he said, I'll be honest with you, I wasn't close enough where I could see facial characteristics. I couldn't tell you if it was an alien.
To listen to the rest of this interview, please go to InceptionRadioNetwork.com and register for the Insiders Club. What is the Insiders Club? The Insiders Club is our premium content, what you've just listened to. Now, what you've just listened to is a preview of that premium content. The Insiders Club is how we pay the bills. It's how you support IRN. You join forces with IRN to get the truth out there. Now, a lot of our content is free. I mean, most of our content is free. All of our live shows are free. If you go to our archives, the vast majority of our archives are for free. But to pay the bills, to help make sure this network stays alive, stays viable, we offer those who really love our radio station, our network, and our shows an ability to support our network and become a part of IRN. Actually join forces in helping us get the truth out there. Now, how do you do this again? You go to InceptionRadioNetwork.com and you subscribe for the Insiders Club, and you'll have access to all of our archives, including this show, the rest of the show. A faster way of getting there, go to the description below this video and click on the link. And like I said, you'll be joining forces with IRN. You'll have availability of all of our content, and we really appreciate your support. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Lorian Fenton here, host of the California MUFON radio show, asking if you'd like special access to exclusive and amazing information about UFOs, the paranormal, and all things unexplained. If you're nodding yes, then join IRN's Insider Club. As an Insider Club member, you'll get an all-access pass to premier Inception Radio Network content for only $4.99 a month. This includes live UFO and paranormal conferences, live streaming UFO skywatches, exclusive IRN radio and TV productions, and of course, paying radio with MJ and Ken Storch. So don't wait any longer. Visit InceptionRadioNetwork.com and click on Member Login to join IRN's Insider Club and get your VIP access today.
To listen to the rest of this interview, please go to InceptionRadioNetwork.com and register for the Insiders Club. What is the Insiders Club? The Insiders Club is our premium content, what you've just listened to. Now, what you've just listened to is a preview of that premium content. The Insiders Club is how we pay the bills. It's how you support IRN. You join forces with IRN to get the truth out there. Now, a lot of our content is free. I mean, most of our content is free. All of our live shows are free. If you go to our archives, the vast majority of our archives are for free. But to pay the bills, to help make sure this network stays alive, stays viable, we offer those who really love our radio station, our network, and our shows an ability to support our network and become a part of IRN. Actually join forces in helping us get the truth out there. Now, how do you do this again? You go to InceptionRadioNetwork.com and you subscribe for the Insiders Club, and you'll have access to all of our archives, including this show, the rest of the show. A faster way of getting there, go to the description below this video and click on the link. And like I said, you'll be joining forces with IRN. You'll have availability of all of our content, and we really appreciate your support. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Lorian Fenton here, host of the California MUFON radio show, asking if you'd like special access to exclusive and amazing information about UFOs, the paranormal, and all things unexplained. If you're nodding yes, then join IRN's Insider Club. As an Insider Club member, you'll get an all-access pass to premier Inception Radio Network content for only $4.99 a month. This includes live UFO and paranormal conferences, live streaming UFO sky watches, exclusive IRN radio and TV productions, and of course, paying radio with MJ and Ken Storch. So don't wait any longer. Visit InceptionRadioNetwork.com and click on Member Login to join IRN's Insider Club and get your VIP access today.
To listen to the rest of this interview, please go to InceptionRadioNetwork.com and register for the Insiders Club. What is the Insiders Club? The Insiders Club is our premium content, what you've just listened to. Now, what you've just listened to is a preview of that premium content. The Insiders Club is how we pay the bills. It's how you support IRN. You join forces with IRN to get the truth out there. Now, a lot of our content is free. I mean, most of our content is free. All of our live shows are free. If you go to our archives, the vast majority of our archives are for free. But to pay the bills, to help make sure this network stays alive, stays viable, we offer those who really love our radio station, our network, and our shows an ability to support our network and become a part of IRN. Actually join forces in helping us get the truth out there. Now, how do you do this again? You go to InceptionRadioNetwork.com and you subscribe for the Insiders Club, and you'll have access to all of our archives, including this show, the rest of the show. A faster way of getting there, go to the description below this video and click on the link. And like I said, you'll be joining forces with IRN. You'll have availability of all of our content, and we really appreciate your support. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Lorian Fenton here, host of the California MUFON radio show, asking if you'd like special access to exclusive and amazing information about UFOs, the paranormal, and all things unexplained. If you're nodding yes, then join IRN's Insider Club. As an Insider Club member, you'll get an all-access pass to premier Inception Radio Network content for only $4.99 a month. This includes live UFO and paranormal conferences, live streaming UFO sky watches, exclusive IRN radio and TV productions, and of course, paying radio with MJ and Ken Storch. So don't wait any longer. Visit InceptionRadioNetwork.com and click on Member Login to join IRN's Insider Club and get your VIP access today.